I'm at Wenatchee Lake State Park near Leavenworth, Washington. Beautiful area of Washington State. It's on the kind of the crest of the Cascades, where it goes from the west side to the east side and the wet side to the dry side. This is a beautiful lake. Many scenes to paint. Just walked a little ways from the parking lot through the trees and found this beautiful view. Not sure what mountain that is. I'll look it up on Google Maps here in a minute. But as you can see, just a gorgeous area. Many lovely scenes to paint. So I think I'm set up here. It's in the shade now. The sun's almost directly behind me. It should be above me in about, well, not really above me since it's only early March. It'll be off to my left and throw some more light on this area where I'm standing. So hopefully I won't get too cold painting here in the shade. I do have a heavy jacket, but I didn't wear my ski pants or my long johns, so it is going to get chilly here in the shade. Beautiful area. I'm going to walk around just a little bit more before I make up my mind. As always, thanks so much for joining me. If you like these videos, please like and subscribe. Here's the scene I want to paint. I think I'll go with a portrait orientation, which is kind of uncommon for landscapes, meaning it's in a vertical orientation, tall and skinny rather than wide. I want to capture a little bit of this foreground rocky bank of snow. It's going to be fun to watch that as the sun travels across it. I may want to pick a dappled shadow pattern or just straight on light or straight on shadow. I'll have to take a look at it and see what I like best. It's got some beautiful colors. I'm not sure if it's coming out in the video, but the sun on the snow is a warm apricot almost, warm peach color, and the snow is a beautiful blue lavender, mostly blue, just a touch of alizarin crimson. It kind of varies in between those two colors, really gorgeous. And the rocks make a neat kind of abstract pattern. So I definitely wanted to capture some of that. I love the reflection of the mountain. I think that's Dirty Face Peak, if you can imagine that. I don't know why it's called that. It's a gorgeous little mountain. But the reflection of that peak in the water is just lovely. I hope the water stays kind of calm so I can try to capture that. Got some ducks and some geese that are going across there once in a while. I'm really drawn to this little island. I don't want to capture the whole island, but this part of it where it is in front of the peak I think is wonderful. Got some really beautiful greens. Got some orange greens and some cool greens. Moss on deciduous trees. You've got leafless deciduous trees with kind of reddish gray branches, and then of course the beautiful giant pine trees. And then the mountain in the background. I'm a sucker for water and mountains, so that'll be fun to paint that mountain. I want to get the feeling of the grandeur, the height of the mountain, and the sweep of the distant pine trees and rocks down the different slopes of the mountain. And I'm always tempted to capture too much detail, so today it's going to be concentrating on simplifying the scene, trying to capture the scene quickly. So there's another layer. There's a layer of pines, distant pines, and a snowy lake shore off in the distance. So I just want to keep that really simple, that far distance. I don't want to paint every tree. I just want to hint at the complexity with a few brush strokes. So what I'll do there is just mix up a color for the light on the pines and a color for the shadow of the pines. And also maybe use some of the colors I mix here grayed down for some of the different trees along that bank, and then just a little line of snow along the bank, and that'll be it. Then there's some reflection in the water. I'll just use the same colors I mix up for the water and color I mix up for the sky, for the reflection of the sky in the water. Beautiful scene. So I'll start with a small bristle brush and sketch the scene. Got turpentine here, artist turpentine. I'm going to concentrate on the NOTAN, which is Japanese for light dark harmony. I'm going to try to separate the values into light and dark first in my mind. I think this scene will be predominantly low value, dark value. So to achieve that, I may have to keep this foreground mostly in shadow. I want light for the mountain reflection and the mountain itself, the sky itself, the snow on the banks, but everything else relatively dark, maybe some of the dappled sunlight. So one thing with NOTAN is you want to try to connect all your darks. I'm going to try to find a way to connect all these different darks into one interesting abstract shape, including whatever darks I put down here in the foreground. I may have a few little straggler rocks, which will be interesting to keep them separate. They'll be kind of the exception. Everything else should be kind of connected. There's the sketch in. Now I'll use this big bristle brush and quickly do the turpentine wash. Once I have the turpentine wash in, then I'll take a little firmer, smaller synthetic brush and wipe out the whitest whites in the scene. I think I'll start with the... I'll go ahead and start with the sky. I'm going to throw just a hint of this radiant lemon in with the sky, just to play, just to try it, see what happens. I'm going to kind of scrub out these charcoal 1/3 lines as I go. For the turpentine wash, I'll go with cerulean blue wash for the sky, down toward the horizon. It's a really high value yellowish blue. For the mountain, I'll use a little bit of radiant lemon to wash that in. I know usually to push things back you don't want to use yellow because as things recede you lose the yellow. But standing here in person, I'm really getting a lot of warm reflected light from that mountain. So I think I'll go ahead and use yellow and paint over that with different shades of very high value white lavender to give it some dimension. I'll use that same light for the snowbanks and for the reflection in the water. For the distant trees, I'll go with alizarin crimson for the closer trees, and for the reflection of the trees in the water, I'll go with cad yellow. There's a lot of warmth in those pines with the sun on them. And for the foreground, snow and rocks, I'll go with alizarin crimson and maybe bump it around with a little bit of transparent oxide brown. And those are mainly the colors I have out on my palette. I also have some yellow ochre out. I'm not sure I'll use it. I'm not seeing much ochre in this scene. I think I'll try to avoid using it. Getting a lot of glare on the painting, so I had to move a little bit. You can see I'm taking my time with the turpentine wash. I really want to create a pattern that I'm interested in. Now I'm going to add back just a little bit of alizarin crimson and cerulean blue and try to establish that NOTAN where the darks connect. Alright, there's the turpentine wash in. Just gonna, you can see where I added some blue back in for the sky and it's bled. I'm just gonna leave that and then play off it a little bit as I go. I may paint over it, I may try to leave some of it, we'll see. But I've got a nice shape of the mountain. I like how that came out. I've got some suggested pine tree lines that are kind of abstract. I'll adjust those as I add the background colors. And then I've got some drip lines that are acting as nice reflections of those trees. So quite a few abstract elements there I could leave if I'm brave enough. We'll see. I'll start mixing the colors now. Just try to match what I'm seeing in the scene as best I can. Yep.
Do you mind if I take a peek?
No, not at all. This is just the initial wash to kind of set the composition, and now I'm mixing the final colors.
Nice. Very nice. Don't know much of anything about painting.
It's a challenge, but it's really relaxing and a lot of fun.
Nice.
Alright, I moved around a little bit again to try to stay in at least partial shade. It's always such a challenge painting on a sunny day unless you want to bring an umbrella. And I don't quite know what to recommend. Sometimes it works great to paint in the shade, but if the shade is too deep, then it's hard to judge color. Sometimes it works great to paint the sun, but if the sun is too bright, again, it's really hard to judge value and color. Not only do your pupils kind of shut down and you take in, it seems like it gets harder than to judge subtle color, but also it just is blinding, very difficult to film, and also difficult on your eyes without wearing sunglasses. So it's just a challenge. You have to figure out what works best for you. I've got some colors mixed up here. I've got some blues for the sky, kind of a deeper purple for the top of the sky, and then more subtle, higher value bluish, yellowish blues. Then I've got some colors for the trees on that distant mountain, and I've got some snow for the distant mountain. And I'll also use this light on the snow color for the foreground, the dappled light on the snow. I've got some shadow on the snow here, and I'll dip into that a little bit here and there, even on the mountaintop, to create the shadow patterns that I'm seeing. This is a very high value gray-green for that distant bank of pine trees. And then here are the closer pine tree colors, the sun on the pines and the shadow of the pines. And I'll dip into some of these deep blue, lavender shadow colors as well for those pine trees, just to shift things cooler if I need to. Then I've got those warm peach and warm lavender colors. This is almost a pink for the leafless branches of the deciduous trees. I'll use these colors also for the rocks. I may shift them a little bit with reds or blues or yellows, just to get close to what I'm seeing here. But there's no real bright, brilliant, unique colors I'm seeing in the rocks here that I want to mix purposefully and try to capture. I think just the value is the most important thing, and as long as I stay within these colors, I'm hoping I get a nice harmony. As usual, I'll start with this evergreen, little larger brush from Rosemary, and paint the sky, and then I'll work down and forward. So the sky, then the mountain, then this far bank, actually the foothill trees, the far bank of trees, these trees. I'll come back in later with the water and the snow banks, and then finally the foreground, water and snow. I'm actually going to paint the snow on the mountain, the majority of the brightest clean snow, and then I can paint against that with the sky color and get a nice soft edge and adjust the shape of the mountain too as I go. Kind of squinting at the mountain to get those subtle value shifts. The snow, when you look straight at it, it almost looks like it's all yellow, very bright white with just a tint of yellow, just a hint of yellow. But if you kind of look at the foreground trees and let the mountain fade in your vision, you can see the color shifts a little more easily. I also know that the plains facing the sun are going to be the brightest, most yellow. The plains tilted slightly away are going to be warmer gray, and the plains facing most up toward the sky are going to be reflecting a blue cast. And then also, as the plain shifts more away from you, you'll get more of a blue cast and a little darker value. All very subtle. Now for the mountain snow reflected in the water, reflections are typically less than. So if this is bright, then this is less bright. If this is dark, then this is less dark. So I want to paint a white here in the water that's a little less bright than the reflected snow, or than the snow up here. Sun is over here, shining this way, so the sky over here is going to be brighter than the sky here. Same thing with the trees climbing up the mountain. Where the trees are facing the sun, they're going to be warmer. Not orange, but in the distance, those rocks appear just a little redder. And where they're tilting into the shade, or where as they draw closer, they're getting darker, but they're also, the shadows are getting cooler, more blue, picking up more of the green of the trees, but not quite a vibrant green. They're too far away. And then the sun on these closer trees is a little more yellow. All of it's really subtle though. You can't be heavy-handed with the saturation, the value, or the saturation. You have to be really subtle to get that realistic distance illusion. Here I can dip in just a touch of that more orange green, and then dip it back into here and see what the impact is, since this is in the sun right now, and use that as these foothills draw a little closer. See how powerful that is, even though it's just a touch of that color. Really fascinating, fun. Alright, I just noticed that my camera is not picking very much of this up at all because I'm in such deep shade. I'm going to try to move just a little bit to get more into the sun. Now carrying on with the same brushes, I'll paint the snow on those distant lake banks, lake shores, and some of the rocks and deciduous trees, and then the pines. Soft Rosemary Master's Choice Series. It's a natural hair imitation mongoose, and I'm just softening some of these distracting edges, barely touching. The sun is casting shadows and it's distracting, so I'm just knocking them down a little bit. I don't want to blend too much because then I lose all the subtle structure of the mountain, but I do want to knock those edges down. At some point along the way the camera shut down, so I'm not sure how much of that you saw. Hopefully you got part of it. There's the finished painting as far as I'm going to get today. The light's really changing now, becoming more flat, and the wind picked up, so the water's become a lot choppier. I've got these colors now that I can take back to the studio and refine the painting just a bit. I'll take that soft brush and knock down some more of the edges in the painting so that I have a nice surface to finish up. Like here, there's a clump of dark paint, so I can just softly knock it off. That's one of the nice things about painting on linen. This is a Gorilla Painter linen panel, 11 by 14. You can scrape it down, you can softly brush it down and knock down these ridges And then even if it dries, you have a nice surface, flat surface to paint over, and you won't paint over those paint ridges. I also like to keep the edges nice and soft. Leaves me more options for finishing it in the studio. Pretty challenging day with the light shifting. I couldn't seem to find a good place to paint where both my palette and my panel were in light but not blinding direct light. Finally found it here at the end, but I'm right beside the edge of the water, different perspective. The water is noisy too now with the wind blowing, but just a beautiful place. Beautiful day, beautiful park. Met some nice people here. I really appreciate you joining me. If you like these videos, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. I'll take it back to the studio and finish it up and put it out on my website. If you'd like to support the channel, please visit my website. I sell these little plein air pieces at a reasonable price because I consider them practice. It really makes me happy when someone likes my art enough that they want to hang it in their home. You can also sign up for my newsletter and stay up to date on my new work and shows and get a discount on original art and prints.